Most mobile apps combine text and images to create a colorful appearance. Android gives you a few different ways of displaying images, and I'll start with the easiest way, using a component named the image view. The image view is a container that can display any drawable image, and there are a few other ways of setting the image that the image view component displays. I'm working in a project named image view, and I'm starting in the layout file, which has two text view components. There's the text view that's displaying the course name string, and a text view displaying a longer string. This text view component is wrapped inside a scroll view, which allows the user to scroll up and down and see all of the text. My goal is to place a graphic, an image, and put it in the top left corner of the screen and force all of the text down on the screen. And I'll be doing this using a relative layout control. So I'll go back to the home screen on the device and return to Android Studio. First, I need a graphic. I've provided some graphical files in the exercise files folder. I'll go to the assets folder and from there to icon. And I'll be working with this graphic, RA icon. It's a fairly large file. This is what it looks like initially. And in this first exercise, I'm going to use the icon in its original format. So I'll copy it to the clipboard from either Windows or File Explorer on Windows or from Finder on Mac. Then I'll go back to Android Studio. In Android Studio, I'll navigate to the Resources folder and from there to the Drawable folder. And I'll paste that file into place. Android Studio shows me a dialog box asking me to copy the file, and I'll click OK, and my file has been placed in the appropriate folder. This is now a drawable resource. The name of the file must be all lowercase and can't include any spaces or other special characters. The file extension should also be lowercase. In this example, I'm using a PNG file, but I could also use a JPG file if I wish. Next, I'll add my image view component to my screen. I'll go to the palette and locate the image view, and I'll drag and drop it. I'm placing it in the top left corner. Don't worry too much about the exact placement. I'll deal with those issues in a moment. Now I'll go to text mode, and I'll locate the image view component that I just dragged into place. I'm going to change the ID that was generated from image view to image icon because it's going to display the RU Academy icon. Next, I'll eliminate any layout attributes that might have been generated other than align parent left and align parent start. And then, if I want to, I can also add align parent top just to make sure that I'm gluing this image to the top of the screen. Next, I'll indicate which drawable resource I want to display. I'll do that with the source attribute, spelled SRC. I'll start with the drawable prefix, and then I'll press Control Space, and I'll type RA and choose RA_icon. Finally, I'll explicitly set the size of the image view. Just like containers and other kinds of components, I'll use DPs, device-independent pixels, to size the image view. This is a square image, so I'm just going to change the layout width and layout height to exactly the same values, 100 dps each. I'll take a look at this in design mode, and I'll see that the graphic is in the right place. But I also see that it's overlaying text instead of pushing the text down. So I'll fix that by changing an attribute in the first text view component. This text view component has an align parent top attribute set to true. I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to replace it with layout below, and I'll anchor this using the ID image icon. So I'm saying that this text view starts below the image, and from there, everything else should flow exactly as it did before. I'll go back to design mode, and I'll see that everything is behaving the way I want it to. I'll save that change, and I'll run the app. And there's the result. The graphic is displayed in the top left corner, the title of the course is just below that, and the description of the course is below that. And I can still scroll up and down to see the long text. So that's how you can display an image resource using an image view component where it's static and you're saying exactly which image you want to display. But there are also times when you want to be able to set this dynamically, and I'll describe how to do that in the next video. I've previously described how to display an image using the image view component. You can also use the image view component to display an image dynamically, deciding which image you want to display at runtime using images from the Drawable Resources folder. I'm working in a project now named Runtime Images, and I've made a little change to this activity layout. In addition to the icon that I had set in the previous exercise, I'm now displaying a second image in the lower left corner. Here's the code that's doing that. I've added a second image view starting at line 51, and it has an ID of image course, and its source is set to this image file, image10101. I'll also go to the project window, to the Drawable folder under Resources, and show that I have two images here, and I can double-click them to see what they look like. I have one ending with the number 1, and the other ending with the number 2. Now my goal is to allow the user to switch from one image to the other at runtime. So I need to add a button component that they can click to make this happen. I'll go back to design mode, and I'll drag a button component and place it in the lower right corner, aligning to the right and to the bottom of the screen. Next, I want to display the text that's displayed on the front of the button, and I can do that in code. I've described how to do that previously, but you can also do this in design mode. I'll double-click the button, and a little dialog box pops up, showing me the currently displayed text. I'll change it to Change Image, and press Enter or Return. I see a little light bulb icon appear. That's my intention action icon that I've seen in code previously. I'll click it, and I'll choose the one and only item, indicating I should use a string resource. And I'm taken to the Extract Resource dialog. I'll assign a resource name for this string, Change Image, with an underscore for the space. When I come back, I see a message, Rendering Problems, Couldn't Resolve Resource. I'll close that error, and I see that the actual string resource ID is being displayed instead of its equivalent string. I'll check to make sure in the strings.xml file that the new resource was created, and it was. It's there on line 8. And then I'll come back to the activity layout, and I'll click the refresh button. And after a moment, I see it's updated and it's now correct. So now I have a button the user can click. I'll go back to text mode, and I'll add an event handler for the click event on the button. I'll add an onClick attribute, and I'll assign a method name. I'll call the new method btn onClickHandler. Then I'll press Alt or Option and Enter, and I'll create the new event handler method in the main activity class. The next step is to get the string for the image I want to display. I'm already displaying image 10101. I want to switch to 10102. So I'm going to create a string variable that has just the beginning of that image name. Don't use the file extension in this string. I'll call the variable image name, and I'll set it to a value of image underscore 10102. And again, I'm not putting in the file extension. That's because as a drawable resource, you're only interested in the beginning of the file name. The file extension is ignored when you create the image resource ID. The next step is to take that string and get the equivalent integer value. All resource IDs are integers, and there's a bit of code you can use to extract that numeric value. I'll create an integer variable that I'll name res for resource. And here's the expression. Start with getResources, then getIdentifier. GetIdentifier takes 3 arguments. First, the resource name. And again, for drawables, that's just the beginning of the image name without the extension. So I'll pass in the variable that I just created, image name. Next, you need the image type, and this is a string. And for drawables, it just matches the name of the folder, drawable. Finally, you need the app package, and you could type this in as a literal string, but instead you can call a method named getPackageName, and now that code returns the integer value that identifies that image resource. Next, I need a reference to the ImageView component. I'll declare a variable typed as the ImageView class from Android.widget, and I'll name it IV for ImageView. Then I'll use the findViewById method that I've used previously, and I'll pass in the ID of the ImageView object. Remember, we have two now, the image icon and image course. I want image course. I'll use an intention action to cast the return value from findViewById as an ImageView component. So now I have my resource and I have my reference to the image view, and I'm ready to reset the image that's being displayed. And I'll do that by calling a method of the ImageView component called setImageResource. And I'll pass in that resource ID, res. So that's all the code you need. I'll run the app in my virtual device, and when the app first appears, it's showing the original image, the one ending with the number 1, but when I click the button, it changes to the other image. If I exit the app by clicking the back button, and then run it again, I'll see that the activity is being recreated from scratch and the original image is being displayed. But I can once again change the image that's being displayed by clicking the button. So this isn't a final app. You would probably never just switch from one image to the other. But this sort of code that sets images dynamically at runtime is critical to understand when you start displaying images dynamically because they come from a complete data set. You can include image files in your Android projects either as resources or as assets. I've described how to use an image as a resource previously. One of the advantages, as we'll see later, of resources is that you can include multiple versions of the image with different resolutions and sizes to support multiple screens. With assets, you can only include one copy of each image. But assets give you more dynamic capabilities. In this version of the project, Image Assets, my activity layout has two buttons. The button that I created previously is now labeled Change to Resource, and I've added a new button named Change to Asset. Here's how it looks in code. The first button is calling BTN onClickHandler, just like before, but the new button is calling BTN2ClickHandler. And this is an empty method. I'll be adding code here to load an image from the Assets folder and display it using the same ImageView component as before. I need to create the Assets folder if it doesn't already exist. When you create a brand new project with the simplest templates, you won't have an Assets folder to begin with, but Android Studio makes it easy to create it. Make sure you're in the Android view, not in the project view. Then go to the menu and select File, New. Then from the menu that appears, choose Folder, Assets folder. Accept all the default settings and click Finish. And that creates the Assets folder here. Next, I'll copy a file into place. I'll go to my Exercise Files folder, to the Assets subfolder, to Images. You can choose any of these images. They're all the same size, and I'm going to choose this one with the musical notes. I'll copy it to the clipboard, then I'll come back to Android Studio, and I'll paste into the Assets folder. And when prompted, I'll click OK to copy the file into place. In order to load the file from the Assets folder, I'll need its file name, and I can copy that directly from the project window by right-clicking and choosing Copy Reference. Now, I'll take that value and create a string variable. I'll declare this as a Java string, and I'll name it image name, and I'll paste the image name between quotes. When you're working with an image stored in the Assets folder, you need to include the entire file name, including the file extension. That's different from a resource where you just use the beginning of the name. Next, I'll get a reference to my ImageView component. I'll take this code from the previous method, and I'll copy and paste it because that's going to be exactly the same. I just need a reference to the image view so I can tell it what to display. Next, I'll need a try-catch block. And within the try block, I'm going to create an input stream. This is a standard Java input stream from the java.io package. And I'll name it stream. And I'll get its value by calling the method getAssets, and from there, the open method. And I'll pass in my image name. And now I have a stream that I can use to read the content. Now, this code is not specific to images. I could use this same basic code to open an XML file or any other sort of asset that's streamable. The next step is to transform that image file into a drawable object. And that's represented by the Android class drawable from the package android.graphics.drawable. I'll name the new object drawable in all lowercase, and I'll instantiate it with this expression: drawable.createFromStream. Notice that there are methods named createFromPath, createFromResourceStream, createFromXML, and so on. This method takes two arguments, the input stream and a source name. I only need the first argument. I'll pass in stream, and then I'll pass in null for the second argument. And then I'm ready to display the image, and I'll do that by calling iv.setImageDrawable. Remember, we previously used setImageResource, so this is a matching method for a drawable object. And I'll pass in the drawable object and complete the code. Now I need to complete the try-catch block. I'll add a catch expression here, and I'll pass in an exception object, and if I get into that exception object, I'll use some logging code. I've already created a log tag constant at the top of this class, so I'll call log.e for error, and I'll use my log tag constant, and I'll pass in e.getMessage. So if I get a Java error, I'll be able to track it in the logcat console. So now I'm ready to test. I'll click the Run button and select the device I want to run on. And when the app opens, it'll initially display the image that I described in the XML layout file. And I can still click the button labeled Change to Resource, and I'll display the image in the Resources folder, but then I'll click Change to Asset, and I see the asset image show up. And now I can click back and forth between displaying a resource and an asset. So those are two different ways of dealing with images dynamically at runtime, as image resources and as image assets.